So let me put that into context for you, the merging of mobile and social. We all know that social engineering has been around for a very, very long time, and the digital world has only enabled it to be more efficient. Now we have phishing attacks on social media network, and I'm sure many of you receive phishing LinkedIn connections. I certainly wrote about it quite a lot. It has also legal implications. Lawyers and regulated firms are now looking at LinkedIn endorsement as a potential source of litigation, especially in regulated industries. And of course, there is always the stupidity of mankind, and I'm sure you have seen this piece of news very recently, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, where an RBS investment bank director was actually sacked because he posted a stupid comment on Snapchat. And the stupid comment was, he was in a board meeting and posted a comment on Snapchat saying how bored he was. So things change. The thing is, mobility, connectivity, the cloud has changed business models. As you can see here, those companies have changed the world of their traditional industries. So demographically, let's have a look at this. By the end of 2015, there'll be 7.2 billion people, of which 4.3 billion people will actually be in employment or capable of employment. That's 60% on the right. Out of that, 1.3 billion people, or 30%, will routinely work remotely. And there'll be 4.9 billion connected things. So, we all know digital has transformed lives. By the end of 2015, more than 1.3 billion workers worldwide will routinely work remotely, and by the end of 2025, millennials, or Generation Y, will represent 75% of the working population. That means that they will be driving the new workforce behaviors. Let's have a look at that. So it's human nature. People don't come to work in the morning and say, I'm going to suck at my job today. They just want to be more efficient on the main. So the growth in mobile means that criminal will be able to phish or spoof or skim or packet sniff, keylog, and impersonate their way into even more sensitive information. And Generation Y is also known as Generation Risk. As you can see there, the kind of behaviors that they exhibit through lack of awareness and knowledge. So let's have a look at some statistics, some of which from Symantec and various other technology companies. The average user has 26 password-protected accounts, but only 5 different passwords. And you know the implications of password reuse. 27% of businesses expect their employees to remember a number of passwords, and 51% of consumers share passwords. So what does that mean? That means we will have multiple online personas, whether it is within and outside the enterprise, and we don't necessarily secure them very well. And as a result, the Symantec Internet Threat Report that came out this month actually shows a very interesting picture. Number of breaches has slightly reduced, so has the number of identities exposed, 348 million in 2014, and average identities exposed per breach, 1.1 million. That is a very large number, but the median identity exposed per breach has actually slightly increased. So it is very lucrative for criminals to harvest identities. In the UK, and this is from the CIFAS Fraudscape 2015, which got published a couple of months ago, ID-related crime represented 48% of all fraud in 2014. And 82% of ID-related crime was committed online. So if we look at the recent Verizon DBIR report, the Data Breach Investigation Report, 23% of recipients opened phishing emails, and 11% click on attachments. And out of those, 50% open the emails and click on links within the first hour. Again, that's human behavior. And if we look at a phishing campaign of just 10 emails, you can almost slap a guaranteed sticker on it. So it is very lucrative, it is very easy, and the digital landscape has allowed that. And there are very good reasons for that. Because if you look at the way criminals actually monetize personally identifiable information, it is extremely lucrative. You can buy 1,000 stolen email addresses, for 50 cents to $10. You can buy custom malware. You can buy scans of real passwords, all of which will enable criminals to create fake identities and further monetize their nefarious activities. So the biggest challenges to any businesses is, of course, new working behaviors. So we're talking about the Internet of Things. Bring your own device. Bring your own wearable. Wearable are all the rage right now, and there are big challenges, and they are becoming increasingly popular, albeit, it is a market that is still in its infancy, but organizations are starting to consider it. And one would be advised, and certainly in certain industries where wearables are most relevant, to include wearables as part of any BYOD policy. The reason behind that is because wearables log even more sensitive information that is even more private to a particular individual. Some sectors are starting to capitalize on wearables, such as insurance, for example, and there were some predictions today that insurers by 2020 will actually use fitness information recorded by wearables to be able to calculate your life insurance premium. Car insurers are already selling black box insurance, where by putting a black box in your car, render it effectively an Internet of Things connected device, are able to reduce your premium if they can see that you're actually driving safely. So it is a reality. It doesn't come without risks. I'm sure you have heard about various hacking of Internet of Things devices, such as the Nest thermostat, but it is undeniable that consumers are actually buying these devices, and they will soon make their way into the enterprise. many people said BYOD will not take off. Consumer demand proved everyone wrong. So greater connectivity brings greater risks. And it is undeniable again that the wearable technology market is only on a path that is going up. So if we have more data, we have more risk, and then we start to scrutinize it. And yes, wearable technology is very, very interesting, but suddenly people get worried about privacy. Of course, it is logging personal information, and as that happens, regulators start looking at it a bit more. So 2 pieces of information for you here. The Information Commissioner's Office, of course, issued a position paper saying that wearable technology is, of course, subject to UK data protection laws, but also a piece of information from the UK government, who was considering proposal to criminalize failure to prevent economic crime. Now, for me, that was a very, very interesting piece of information, because the definition of economic crime by the National Crime Agency includes a number of things, but it also includes identity theft. Direct implication on a corporation means that potentially your CEO will be liable for ID theft. It's interesting. There are proposals, but certainly the fact that they're looking at it is certainly worrying. And of course, the market is growing. There is no doubt about that. But the growth of the market in wearables actually generated the growth in the security market, which makes absolute sense.
Another first for our
However,
study of the risks presented by mobile devices. With the rise of mobility and BYOD, we expected that mobile malware would be a significant threat to organizations. But our analysis proves that it's not yet. And while the billions of connected devices, otherwise known as the Internet of Things, made the news a lot last year, attacks against it didn't. Instead, we continue to face familiar foes, like increasingly effective phishing attacks, misuse of credentials, and new varieties of malware that plague organizations of all sizes. Managing risk is critical to the growth, performance, and reputation of your organization. And knowing more about attacks is your most powerful weapon against cybercrime.
So it's not all bad news. The reality of things is, yes, there is a lot of malware. Yes, it is predominantly on iOS devices. However, as far as breaches, there are very few of them, as you can see from the Verizon DBI report, which I urge you to read. It makes for very interesting reading. So working behaviors and the way the technology infrastructure is actually moving is interesting, and we are increasing our reliance on the cloud, because the cloud is very flexible, because of its price, and because of a desire to enabling the generation Y we were talking about earlier, to be able to do things from anywhere at any time. And also for those in retail or consumer-facing organization, this desire for the holy grail of omnichannel, which nobody, as far as I can tell, is doing very well. So modern behaviors increase reliance on the cloud, managed services, and other third-party solutions, which in turn makes it absolutely necessary for organizations to review their supply chain due diligence, because that itself could introduce vulnerabilities. So is it time for a new approach to security? So we've talked about mobility, we've talked about the cloud, and it is a fact of life that the perimeter firewall will now handle more internal to internal traffic because of what we've just discussed. And by 2018, cloud will represent 75% of total data center traffic. So if we put that into context, and if we look at BYOD and mobile working growth, security risks from within the organization network are expected to grow by nearly 50% by 2017. So what do we do about that? Well, it's difficult, because as a CIO, as a CSO, you have to juggle a number of things: performance, availability, and security. And it's difficult, because there are obstacles mainly due to disjointed and complex and hard to manage legacy architectures. So it is a struggle. So do you think your enterprise assets are still within your known perimeters? And I think from the previous speakers and from what we just seen, probably not. So is it time for a paradigm shift? So interesting survey here from Barracuda Networks. New working patterns will challenge application access and security. Most people agree that to be the case. Poor and predictable application performance negatively impacts the business. This is kind of common sense, so most people agree that that is the case. However, do we recognize the need to move from network perimeter to application perimeter? Mostly we do. Have we done anything about it? Mostly we don't. So there is a big gap. So do you still think it's about the endpoint? I mean, it can be about the endpoint. Of course, the endpoint is important. But if we look at a recent study by IBM, it's called the IBM X-Force report, 40% of large companies are not taking proper precautions to secure their mobile applications. 33% of companies never test their applications. And 5.5% of the total mobile app development budget is allocated to ensuring that mobile applications are secure. So it's not a pretty picture. And that is because on the main, we still haven't made the shift from what is largely considered to be internal versus external to what really should be public versus private. Or in other terms, moving from a network perimeter approach to an application perimeter approach. Yes, the application perimeter. So, employees have increasingly complex and challenging digital footprints that we've just seen. And users want access to everything, information, application. They want to do it from any device, time, place. But IT must have tighter security and proper oversight and control to protect the enterprise assets. I'll let you read that. Men are so simple and yield so readily to the desires of the moment that he who will trick will always find another who will suffer to be tricked. Does anyone know who that quote is from? That was Niccolo Machiavelli, 1582. Social engineering is a very old practice, and it doesn't change. We still fall for it.
We've been hearing a lot about cybersecurity lately, largely because of what happened to Sony. Companies and individuals are more concerned about the safety and privacy of their information than ever. President Obama has unveiled a number of new proposals this week to crack down on hackers, and he plans to address this in the State of the Union speech on Tuesday. And it's great that the government is working on this, but the truth of the matter is we need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. You know, the most popular password in the United States is Oh yeah, now you know my password. Yeah, well, the important thing is you live in
So you see where I'm getting to. These are not bad people. These are people you employ. So for criminals, it's very easy to commit a social engineering attack. Why try and hack the perimeter when you can just get passwords and credentials? So 55% of information security professionals believe that username password authentication should be completely eliminated or at least relegated to non-business critical application. I actually happen to agree with that. 57% of these businesses use multi-factor authentication technologies. And that means there is an absolute boom in the market. Multi-factor authentication and any identity companies are an absolute boon for technology entrepreneurs and VCs. So let's have a look at that. I recommend you read the Gartner Predict 2014 report on identity and access management. I happen to agree with all the conclusions they've made in that. But essentially, they're saying there that by 2020, everything as a service, 60% of digital identities interacting with enterprises will come from external providers through competitive marketplaces. You're even starting to see quite a few open source applications doing just that. And overall, IAM product and services, as a result, their pricing will drop by about 40% relative to what it is now. And the pricing models will move from user-based to transaction or processing-based. So it will become much more cost-effective. What might make this prediction come true is obviously user social identity for certain application is definitely increasing. There are more and more government-backed digital ID initiatives. We've got here in the UK gov.verify, which was just launched, but many other countries are much more mature than the UK in terms of digital ID. There are quite a lot of providers on the market and quite a lot of consolidation from the big players. What may hinder this prediction is legacy implementation of identity and access management system, which will obviously increase stickiness for the vendors and their customers. Lack of trust in third-party identity providers, due to supply chain due diligence. Lack of interoperability, mainly, and legacy systems. And also, in certain industries and jurisdictions, there will obviously be legal and regulatory implications. So, however, identity more and more, when it comes to looking at business value, is seen as a growth asset. 70% of all businesses will use what is called attribute-based access control as the dominant mechanism to protect critical assets. And that is extremely important because we are used to role-based identity. And role-based identity is no longer, in my opinion, fit for purpose because you need many more attributes in our hyper-connected world. You need to know where you are. Geolocation becomes extremely important. Age of an email address to identify criminals. They may have just created it. There are services that provide you with that. Where you are located from a particular point. Are you near the store? Are you near your laptop? Where is your mobile phone? All of those data points that are necessary in this world to be able to identify who you are and certainly sorting out and filtering criminal activity whilst retaining suitably enhanced customer experience. And that's very difficult. And as a result, 60% of enterprises will use identity analytics and intelligence to deliver direct business value beyond access and governance. Because knowing your customers is getting closer to them and therefore selling more and increasing revenue. So what would make this come true is one-dimensional role-based access control, as I've said earlier on, is becoming limited. Good IT governance requires knowledge of attributes and contextual information. So you have to know yourself. You have to know use cases like the previous speaker was saying earlier on. And we do have vendors starting to support attribute-based access control. What would make this more difficult is software development methodology may be slow to incorporate attribute-based. Not enough vendors as yet providing this kind of technology, and of course again legacy applications which are always difficult to migrate and incorporate, and not forgetting privacy concerns, of course. And of course the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is redefining many things, including identity. So that's extremely important, and things will have an identity. So they're becoming part of day-to-day life. They're part of context, those things. And enterprises are increasingly adopting these types of technologies. I'm talking BYOD, electronic tags, sensors, and all of these things. It's happening right now. What would make this more difficult is identity and access management vendors slow to move to IoT identity management. It is starting to happen. Things themselves, as you have seen, eminently hackable, still lack identity and access management features. And again, lack of interoperability and standards, and disparity and legal and regulatory issues. As for everything, as indeed it did happen for BYOD, 80% of user access will be shaped by new mobile and non-PC architectures. So, and it will have to cater for many identity types and identity models, federated or otherwise, depending on the type of service you want to access. Accessing a social media network or a news page is a very different proposition to accessing your bank account. So over 80% of enterprises will allow unrestricted access to non-critical assets. And that makes sense because it is good risk management practice. So what would make this come true? Well, cloud is definitely mainstream. Social media and BYOD is pushing adoption of all these technologies, and there is a competitive market right now. Of course, same caveats as before. There is still stickiness and legacy architectures. Sometimes, in fact, more often than not, stringent and inflexible corporate access policies. Certainly in large corporations, that seems to be always the case. And consumer-centric IAM vendors, who are the ones who will be leading the way in these new ways of authenticating individuals, are still slow to provide the corporate-grade kind of identity and access management that is required for this brave new world. So, hyperconnectivity, the growth of the application economy, which is what we're talking about here, combined with the lack of business readiness, have facilitated the explosion of cybercrime. So there are more risks. And criminals are definitely getting better at knowing you and your business, because there is so much more information about you and your business that can be accessed now that it is no longer on paper. So I would suggest once you stack the odds in one's favor, and you have to know yourself first of all. Know yourself, that means understanding and classifying your information and application assets. And this has nothing to do with technology. This has to do with your business. What do you do? What my information assets are? Which ones do I really care about and which ones I don't care about? Definitely develop and enhance an application security strategy. In most organizations I work with, it is definitely something that needs to be enhanced. Understand your risk and threat profile. It is about risk management. There is no point, absolutely no point, in spending £100 in protecting a £1 asset. And all too many organizations do just that. It's about investing in your people, understanding the new working behaviors, as we have seen. Implement flexible and focused security strategies that do not hinder performance. Understand your customers as well, because your customers may be the source of risk. Training, awareness, role play are always absolutely crucial, and there is definitely underspend in most organizations I deal with, and you have to be prepared. You have to monitor identity and authentication trends very closely. It is a growth market. It is going to become mainstream very, very soon. Prioritize bring your own authentication or bring your own ID initiatives, as part of your information security strategy, not forgetting looking at your legacy infrastructure, because it does take a long time for a transformation program. And as always, it all comes down to going back to basics. And going back to basic, regardless of whether it's about mobility or hyperconnectivity or standard infrastructure, it's always about logging, monitoring, threat intelligence, cooperation within industries, across industries, with law enforcement, and first and foremost, effective and inclusive incident monitoring and response. Because if you look at the cyber kill chain, 6 or 7 steps, the earlier you actually catch an incident, the cheaper it is. And that's me. Thank you.
Just for a second, are there any questions? I assume there will be. Yeah, at the back.
You mentioned about once they're through the legal requirements, there's massive movement now with the slush funds from the IS, from the slaving, from the drugs, and now this has given many more legs to the octopus to actually move the money about. So are there still same legislatory powers going to, as far as I read them, we're going to cover all of this, so anybody introducing the safety measures is going to have to watch for money laundering movement?
Absolutely. Those very same requirements apply. The anti-money laundering regulation, as you know, is part of the current Payment Services Directive. The second Payment Services Directive, which is currently in trialogue, certainly has not only a very big piece on anti-money laundering and all such good things which form part of the traditional PSD, but what is interesting in the Payment Services Directive 2, which in my opinion won't come into effect until 2017 or thereabout, includes also a very big section on security and a very big section on strong authentication. So identity and authentication vendors are going to have a field day. Niccolo Machiavelli, he wrote The Prince. Yeah. It is a great book.
Any other questions? I mean, I've got a quick one, if you may. Obviously, we've got new data protection regulation coming through in the EU this year. I'm not sure exactly when it lands. So I'm just curious, because I appreciate the market is moving so fast, technology innovates so fast. What's your view on some of the regulation that's coming in at an EU level, that the theory being that it will help kind of at least address the complexity if you're a global company trying to navigate the various different interpretations of data protection on a local level within certain countries. So I'm just curious to understand your view on the EU Data Protective Initiative.
Okay, my view on the EU Data Protection Initiative is some of the text is still a bit vague, and they will have a lot of problems across geographies in Europe, because, for example, in Germany, the DP laws over there are very, very stringent, not only at the national state, but also the federal laws are quite different and much more stringent, in fact, than in the UK. What it will do, it will give the ICO, I believe, the ICO or similar authorities more powers to fine organization. They currently can fine up to £500,000. I believe that will increase, and it gives ICO more powers. There are some contentious ideas in there, such as the breach disclosure timeline. If you read any data breach report in relation to data protection organization, very, very rarely discover a breach until, sometimes years after or months after. And I think depending on which text you read is 24 or 72 hours how do you actually do that. So that will be a very, very difficult one. And of course there is the privacy aspect. And I hope the regulation will be pragmatic about what is being done. I mean, my view is we share more and more information willingly, and we should certainly have a choice. There is a report that got published maybe 2 weeks ago from Comres, and it's called Big Brother Watch. And in there, it was very interesting for me to see that the majority of respondents were actually quite happy to share their personal information with organization as long as they knew what the organization was going to do with it, where it was going to go, and that it was actually safe. So attitudes are changing. It certainly wasn't the case a few years back. So if I put my information on Facebook and it gets hacked, if I put, my holiday pictures and my date of birth and whatever else, then I've only got myself to blame.